Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katy Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katy Sewell. Tiffany is away this week, but I am joined by Therese Huston. She's a cognitive scientist at Seattle University, where she turns good research into great practice. She's the author of 4 books, and her latest is Sharp, 14 Simple Ways to Improve Your Life with Brain Science, published with Mayo Clinic Press. Therese has led workshops and delivered presentations to Fortune 500 companies, startups, and universities all over the globe, and her expertise are sought after both nationally and internationally, and we are lucky enough to have her with us today. So thank you so much for being here.
So fun to be here, Katy. Thank you.
And if you recognize some of these topics about brain science, it's probably because we already did 2 episodes based on her book. If you want to catch up, that's episodes 589, which was called Vision Boards Don't Work, and episode 590, How to Cultivate a Growth Mindset. But now we actually have her here with us, so that's great. It's not just us waxing on about your writing, which is good. And I think my goal for this conversation is to give the people who are listening some practical ideas that are based in science that can make them feel sharper in their day-to-day lives. But kind of like an overarching question, why did you decide you wanted to write this book in particular?
Well, I'm a neuroscientist by training, and I have wanted to make neuroscience useful for a really long time. And if you're a patient, neuroscience has been useful for decades. But for everyday people who are healthy, neuroscience has been in this realm of like, here's how we do scans, and here's how we make scans safe for people and comfortable for people. And if you've ever had an fMRI or an MRI, then you know like that is, the claustrophobia there is an issue. So neuroscience for years has been just focused on making all of that technology comfortable and workable for people. But now we're getting to a point just in the past decade where neuroscience is helping us with memory, or it's giving us insights as to how to be more creative, how to have better focus. And I thought, oh yes, this is the sweet spot. This is where it gets helpful. And I wanted to bring it to everyday people because I was finding neuroscience was helping me live a better life on a daily basis. And so I wanted to make that helpful to other people too.
And the book is broken up into different categories, like focus is one, memory improvement is one. How did you come up with the categories? Were you just being attracted to different science and were forging the categories based on what you were reading, or how did you put it together?
It was a combination of what topics are interesting to me. So for instance, focus. I started writing the book during the pandemic and I was having trouble focusing. I don't know about you, but oh my gosh, I got so pulled into the news cycle. I mean, as a journalist, you probably read the news every day anyhow, but I found myself in the mornings, I'd sit down to work and I couldn't get focused because I was checking, what is Fauci saying? What's the latest mask update? Ooh, how bad is COVID in my neighborhood, right? Right? So I got into some really bad habits and I was having trouble breaking them even as the pandemic began to wane. And so I needed my own strategies for focus. So I turned to neuroscience to get some ideas. So part of it was driven by my own needs for strategies. And then the other half is exactly what you said, which was, okay, where is neuroscience actually helpful? So for instance, neuroscience is giving us a lot of great information about how to improve memory and how to improve sleep. I decided not to do something on sleep because there's so many great books on sleep out there already. My editors wish that I had said more about sleep, but I'm like, I'm going to give the same advice everybody else gives, right? So I'm not going to go there. I want to do something that was novel, that perhaps you haven't read before. And so it was that combination of my own personal curiosity for certain topics and then also where is there the most gold when it comes to neuroscience.
Well, okay, I have to say, and I've told you this off the air as well, but for years I've been hearing arguments for why I should meditate on a regular basis. And I don't know why. None of them really hit home enough where I might try it for a day or two and then I'm like, nah, I mean, what are we really doing here? But your book, you give like the most credible, I thought, and concrete reason for why a person would meditate on a regular basis. And so I feel like we have to share the reason why to meditate.
So I don't know about you, but I have been an intermittent meditator for years, right? Occasionally meditating, mostly not meditating, occasionally doing some great yoga retreat, and then like, yes, I'm going to meditate. Anyway, I knew, and when I speak to audiences and I'll ask people, raise your hand if you think meditation is probably beneficial. 90% of the people in the audience raise their hand, and then I ask, so how many of you meditate on a regular basis? And 80% of them drop their hands, right? So lots of people know that there could be benefits to meditation, and they usually think of it as relaxation. When I'm feeling overwrought, or maybe I can't sleep, I'll meditate and that will help me out. And apps like Calm and others have perpetuated that view that like meditation's just for relaxation, or that it's a way to deal with your stresses of a daily life. So when a delightful surprise for me, and it sounds like for you, was to find out, oh my gosh, meditation has huge benefits for your brain. And for instance, one of the things that they found is that meditating on a daily basis, or at least 5 days a week, okay, let's be honest.
Every day, yeah.
Every day, no. But 5 days a week of meditation actually leads to something called neurogenesis, which is neurogenesis, the genesis of new neurons. You actually can add, as an adult, new neurons. I learned in school many years ago that the only people who are gaining new neurons are infants and children. But they've found you can actually add new neurons to one region of your brain. It's the hippocampus, deep in your brain, and it's responsible for memory. And one of the ways to do it that's accessible to all of us, that is free and easy and only takes about 10 minutes a day, is meditation. So this to me was amazing, because what we know from a neuroscience perspective, this part, Katy, is one of the most surprising findings in the research for me. We lose, once we get to age 40, we lose about 5% of our hippocampus every decade, right? So if you don't take steps to preserve that brain area, it's shrinking. You have less of it by the time you're 50, and even less at 60. And you might not feel it at 50, but by 60 or 70, all of a sudden, memories aren't going to be coming to you as quickly. It's going to be harder to learn things. You're going to get frustrated. And so, wow, meditation can put new neurons in that space. Basically, you're getting a remodel, right? You're adding a wing to your house or a room to your house, and otherwise your house is shrinking. So why not do it?
See, that is compelling. You have to admit that that's compelling. Does it matter what kind of meditation you do? Because there are so many. I mean, if you just type in 10-minute meditation, the range of like ones that seem ridiculous to ones that seem good is vast. So is there a certain type we should be doing?
Yeah, I fear these are going to be fighting words, because for instance, I have a friend who deeply believes in Buddhist meditation and has found it a lifesaver in terms of dealing with situations in her life. So as you've said, there are so many types of meditation. I'm not saying that many types of meditation aren't beneficial, but just in terms of what we know from the neuroscience, what the neuroscience indicates is the kind of meditation that will add new neurons to your hippocampus is something called mindfulness meditation. And mindfulness meditation, I'm just early in my practice of this, I'll admit, but kind of has two components. There's the mindful awareness. You're trying to maybe become aware of your breathing, or become aware of something you're focusing on, like a candle. So there's a mindfulness component, and then there's a focus component, that focusing in or being mindful of your thoughts. What are my thoughts or my feelings? And I'm also focusing on, like I said, maybe your breathing or some point in space and time. So that mindfulness component and that attention and focus component combined seems to add new neurons. So again, maybe Buddhist meditation does as well, maybe loving kindness meditation. There are so many versions, but the one that neuroscientists can put a big check mark next to and say, we know this kind will give you more gray matter, it's mindfulness meditation.
Okay. So I would save this as a big reveal, but since we're talking about memory, one of the things that shocked me the most in your book was that in looking at what activity adults over 60 can do to actually improve their memory and to improve, to actually create new gray matter, what we hear all the time is do the crossword puzzle. The crossword puzzle is probably the one that's highlighted the most. You should do the crossword puzzle if you want to make sure that your mind is still sharp. You tell us in this book what single activity is the most successful at doing this. And I've been quizzing people in my day-to-day life, like, what would you say is the one activity you could be doing to improve your memory and increase gray matter? And nobody is guessing this particular activity. So please tell us what it is.
So the number one activity, and it's not brain games either, because I often hear that one. I don't know about you, but people think, oh, it's a brain game, right? That's the one that's studied and proven.
Yeah, do the Wordle.
Exactly. Do the Wordle, do some Sudoku, right? Actually, the thing that has the most documented benefit for improving gray matter and improving memory over age 60, dance lessons. Mm-hmm. No joke. And this has been studied not just in the US, but internationally. And it doesn't seem to matter which kind of dance. So, when they studied it in South America, it's the tango. And when they studied it in Europe, it might be waltz, or in even hip hop. In the US, it might be line dancing, right?
Yeah.
Or Zumba classes. But the point being that what they find again and again in these studies is that people over 60 who take dance lessons for at least 6 months, and that seems to be important, is that you can't just go to one dance class and be like, woohoo, I've got more brain. No, you need to have some continuity there. But going to dance lessons for at least 6 months over the age of 60, even people in their 70s and 80s, improve their memory and add new brain cells to their hippocampus. It's remarkable.
Yeah, and why? Why is that?
Yeah, right. So here's the working hypothesis. So the working theory is that dance hits a trifecta, okay? So the trifecta is there's a memory component, and that part's obvious. You have to learn the steps, right? These are lessons, right? So you're learning like, it's a 3-2 step, and how do I do that 3-2 step, whatever it might be. So there's a memory component, there's a physical component, and when you combine physical activity with memory, that seems to have big benefits, in part because you're getting your heart pumping, you're getting your muscles moving, and we can talk about what that does for your brain. But that combination, basically things that are good for your heart are good for your brain in most cases. So you're moving, and you've got a memory component simultaneous. And then the third part of this trifecta, there's a social component, right? You're bumping into people. You have a dance partner. Even if you are doing line dancing and don't have a dance partner, you're still you're probably not doing line dancing solo, right? There's at least one instructor who's guiding you in this. And that social component also seems to light up the brain. So having all three at once, you might be someone who's over 60 thinking, I'll walk with a neighbor. That's great. There's a social component and a movement component. That's better than just a social component by itself, like going to a trivia night. So dance is even better, though, because now there's going to be a memory component. You're trying to actively learn at the same time. So it's beautiful. And I've heard some researchers add a fourth component, and that is what's nice about dance lessons compared to other activities like a Zumba class is that there are people expecting you to show up. Right? And so you're more likely to show up. Whereas with a Zumba class, you're like, oh, but you know what? I need to go see my doctor, or somebody's coming to town, and so I'm going to make time for them. Whereas with dance class, you're like, it's every Wednesday night at 7:00. I've got to go. Right?
Right.
My dance partner is expecting me to show up. And so people are more likely to be consistent with a dance class than they are with other things that they feel if they miss a week, it doesn't matter. With a dance class, you're like, we're learning blank this week. I need to be there. Right.
What about the touch component? Because a lot of dances have a touch component too.
Ooh, see, so nice. Yes, because one of the things that touch does, as long as you feel safe, right? So touch can be alarming and scary, but as long as the touch feels safe and it builds a sense of trust, that releases something called oxytocin, which people think of as the love hormone, but it's also a trust hormone, right? When people are administered, they actually in the lab, as opposed to touching people in the lab, they will give them a nasal, a little squirt of oxytocin in your nose, and that immediately gets into your bloodstream. And when people have oxytocin in their system, what they've learned from these nasal sprays with oxytocin is that people are more likely to just kind of give other people the benefit of the doubt. I haven't seen research on oxytocin improving memory per se, but oxytocin does lead to increased dopamine, and dopamine indirectly can improve memory because it makes you feel motivated. So if you're touching someone that feels good, you're going to feel more motivated. That might increase how much you pay attention and try, all of which could lead to better memory.
It's so interesting. Yeah, we're not going to get too deeply into all the chemicals, like the dopamine dumps and the oxytocin, but it's fascinating, like how if you activate, like for instance, I think in your chapter about focus, you talk a lot about dopamine, and if you can get it going, it can actually help you get your projects underway a little bit, or have you paying attention to what you're trying to do better. All right. Let's talk, though, about breathing, because there are lots of chapters where you mention breathing, everything from stress reduction to focus to better decision making. Breath has something to do with it, according to the science. So I guess the main question is why? Why does breath have so much to do with all of these different things?
Well, can I do a demo?
Sure.
All right. We're going to do a demo. And then I'll explain why breath has so much to do with all of these things. So what I'd like you to do, Katy, and anyone who's listening right now can join along. In a moment, I'll explain it first, and then we'll do the demo. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to exhale all of your air, and then I'm going to have you inhale to a count of 5. So it's a long, slow inhale. I'll count out loud. And then I'll have you hold for a count of 2, and then I'll have you exhale for a count of 7, and I'll guide you the whole way. And for most people, the hardest part is that long, slow inhale. 5 is slow and long. So if you find we get to 3 and you're like, oh no, that's it, Therese, I can't take it anymore. Just start holding your breath early. That won't be a problem. And then we'll do the long, slow exhale to a count of 7. For some people, that's the harder part. Again, if you lose it and you're like, I've exhaled all my air at 7, just start holding your breath again early. But the long, slow exhale is actually the more important part. So if there's going to be one part that you're going to want to try to do that long, slow exhale. And you can always do it through pursed lips, like you're blowing on a piece of pizza. Mm-hmm. And that'll slow it down. Okay. All right.
I'm ready.
You feel ready? Okay, great.
I'm ready.
All right. So exhale all of your air. All right. And we're going to inhale 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold 2, exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, inhale 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold 2, exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so I should have asked earlier, but now I'll ask on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is I'm super stressed, I would never be able to relax. And 1 is I'm so relaxed, Therese, I could fall asleep. What number would you give it?
I feel pretty relaxed.
You feel pretty relaxed?
Yeah, 3.
3? Oh, nice.
Yeah, 3 or 4.
Do you feel a little more relaxed than you did before we did the activity? Or?
Yeah, I think, well, you know where I feel it more is like, it's like in your head. Your head just gets this lighter feeling.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because I wasn't doing the breathing activity because I'm counting, but even just watching you do it and listening to your breathing, like I feel more relaxed just listening to you do it, right? So it's I don't know if those are mirror neurons. I don't know what's happening there, but I feel more relaxed just hearing you doing the breathing. So what's happening there? So neuroscientists, that's called either a skewed breath. We can call it a 5-2-7 breath. But basically, it's a skewed breath because the exhale is really skewed. It's a long tail, right? If you can picture a curve, there's a sharp inhale and a super long exhale. And what researchers find is that when we do that when the exhale is longer than the inhale, one of the things that happens is we activate, first of all, the vagus nerve, which runs down from the brain, down the back of the throat, into the lungs, the heart, the gut. But it also runs back up the other direction. So what's beautiful about this is the brain can tell the heart and the lungs and the tummy, we're relaxed now, right? You just finished a big presentation and your whole body's like, oh my gosh. Right. Yeah. Or, you just finished interviewing Hillary Clinton, right? And then your body's like, okay, it's okay. The interview's over, Katy, we can relax. So it can go down and tell your body to relax, or the signal can go up. And that's what we just did. We basically, by controlling that long, slow exhale in your lungs, send a signal up to your brain that even though we're doing this interview and you're holding a microphone here in front of me, like, just relax. And it's telling your brain, it basically bypasses what your brain thinks is important in the moment, and it's activating the prefrontal cortex, which can help improve your reasoning and decision making. It calms down the amygdala, which is your threat detector. I mean, we can talk about the amygdala in a number of ways, but the amygdala is saying everything is important right now, be on high alert. And instead we're telling the amygdala, hey, just relax, it's okay. Because if my breathing is nice and slow, everything must be okay, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm exhaling slowly, you would only do that when everything is okay, right? When the threat is past. And so it's a beautiful way for you to use your body, a somatic experience, to send a signal to your brain. Even if your brain's not believing it, the body is convincing it, everything's okay. So I love this technique. I have done it when I'm stressed out. in the grocery store, right? When none of the lines are moving and I have someplace to be and I'm going to be late and I'm calling the person and can't reach them and I'm just like, just do the slow breathing technique. Or I've done it in meetings with people where they don't even know I'm doing it, right? You don't have to do the slow exhale with your pursed lips. You can just breathe silently and the other person won't know, and you're basically telling your body, hey, it's okay. So it's really and the other beautiful part about this is researchers find it also improves decision making because it's activating the prefrontal cortex right behind your forehead. It improves decision making and reasoning. So I haven't used it yet for this purpose, but if you have a tough decision to make and you're feeling like you can't figure out which option to pick, you've got 3 options ahead in front of you and you're not sure which is the best one, try this breathing technique. You want to do it for about 2 minutes is what researchers find. We did it for about 30 seconds. So we did 2 cycles, do 8 cycles, and there should be some clarity that you didn't have beforehand.
I do find that I've tried it in days when I have done meditation where I'm having trouble focusing. That if I do that 5-2-7, it actually makes me like focus on what I'm doing a little bit more rather than making all the lists of, as soon as this meditation's over, I'm going to go like,
right. Well, so the way I'm using it right now, so I do something called Lumen. I'm sure there's Lumen Technologies and Severance, right? That's not it. Lumen, it's this breathalyzer that helps you kind of gauge some different things in your metabolism. And if I've had a stressful night and I didn't sleep well, in the morning, my Lumen reading will indicate that I'm in a state I don't want to be in. Let's just put it that way. If I do this breathing technique for just 2 minutes, it immediately brings down my Lumen score, and it's a really validating measure of like, oh my gosh, my body, I can feel relaxed. I can tell, I know that I'm feeling more relaxed, but there's this external measure where basically it drops the score by 20%, and I know, wow, like my body is more relaxed, and it's showing up in my breathing. In my body chemistry has changed. The breathalyzer's measuring your body chemistry, and in 2 minutes, I've changed my body chemistry, which is just incredible.
Yeah, that is incredible. Does it have to be the 5-2-7, or could it just be like,
what I've seen, there's an app called Breathwork that I've got a subscription to, and so what they do and some others will recommend is just as long as the exhale's they'll say twice as long as the exhale, but I find like a 5-2-10 breath really hard to do, right? So you could try 3-2-6. You could try 4-8, right? The holding in the middle is just something so that you kind of don't start to feel like you're hyperventilating, right? So kind of that hold gives your body, it doesn't feel like you're rushing it, right? But anyway, as long as the exhale is longer than the inhale. So yeah, maybe that short one that you just did would work. But I know that when I've heard experts in this do it, usually they do like 3-6 or 4-8.
It's interesting. It somehow reminds me of something someone said to me long ago, that smokers are the only ones that build in this long breathing into their day. And of course, it counterbalances it with the problems of like the stress of needing nicotine adds to your life. But that they really are the only group that goes outside for like 20 minutes every few hours and takes like a lot of deep breaths and slow exhales. It's interesting. It's too bad, that smoking's not healthy for you, because they are the only group that naturally builds it into their day, which, I don't know. It was just an interesting thought, I thought.
And that's so interesting because I have sometimes, I had a friend maybe 20 years ago who used to go and take smoke breaks, and I would sometimes go out with him and just stand, because it was nice to be outside, right? Otherwise, I might go until lunchtime, I might go 4 hours without stepping outside. And this was an excuse. I hadn't thought about the breathing part, but just even getting out and just stepping outside, getting a break, stepping away from my desk, right? Yeah. Oh, very interesting.
Going and talking to the other smokers. Okay, well, here's another great thing that I thought you did wonderfully in this book. I mean, the whole book is just fascinating. I have so many notes. But you do a great example of why multitasking doesn't work. And as a person who came from an NPR radio background, I mean, the day was so much multitasking, because it was like you're working on the show for tomorrow, but then your phone's ringing, from the guest you're trying to book, and then this intern's asking you a question, and you are just jumping from one thing to the other all day long. And I heard many times people say, well, multitasking is one of my greatest strengths. I'm really good at jumping from one task to another throughout the day, and you do a great example of like why that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, do you mind if I demo that as well?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so this one is going to stress you out.
Okay, great.
So I apologize in advance. But other people can try this, and we can always, you can go back and do the breathing technique later to get yourself back in a regulated state. All right, so we're going to demonstrate the hidden perils of multitasking, because like you said, so many people take pride in this. I was just on another podcast recently where the person before we started was saying how much better she is at multitasking than her husband, and I was like, maybe you didn't read my chapter.
Clearly she did not read the full book.
In any case, so what I'm going to ask you to do out loud, Katy,
Okay.
as fast as you can. I want you to count from 1 to 10. Go.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I could probably go faster too, but
That's great. Yeah, I'll bet you can too. Now I want you to say the letters A through J out loud as fast as you can. Go.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J.
Good job. And you stopped at J. So often people, we're just so used to, if you're a Native American speaker at least, you just zoom past J.
Yes.
Okay, great. Now that was single tasking,
Okay.
or monotasking, whatever you like to call it. Now I'm going to ask you to say a letter and then a number as fast as you can, like A1, go.
Okay. A1, B2, C3, D4, E5, F6, or A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 7, H, is that right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, 8, I, 9, H, I, J, 10.
It gets so hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you were more compliant than most. Most people give up at like E, and they just laugh and they let it go. So what this demonstrates, and as you heard, and if you were playing along, like the further you get, the harder it gets, right? Like you're just like, where was I? What were we on? Number 7, number 8? What letter comes after G, right? You lose your place, all of it. It's really hard. So what's revealing about that, first of all, those are both things you've known how to do for a very long time. If you're a native English speaker, you've been counting and saying your numbers. So those are relatively easy tasks to do, and yet it illustrates that when you try to do them simultaneously or to interleave them, it gets really hard. You start making mistakes. Researchers find that mistakes, even for tasks we don't know nearly as well as those two, go up by 47%. So just picture that. You're writing an email. Let's say you're writing an important work email. You're doing it in the kitchen. Your partner is chatting with you, right? Because the two of you are like getting dinner ready, but you just have this one email. You just need to get it out because you promised someone you'd reply to them. Imagine if your mistakes in that email went up by 47% just because you're chatting with your partner about how much more garlic should I put in to dinner, right?
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what happens. And so as well as the brain activity for different regions that are focused on writing that email, on average, go down by 37%. So you're also not thinking as clearly or as well and that's partly why the mistakes go up. But it's really interesting to me because what I'm trying to do is practice single tasking with more pride. To just say I am good at single tasking, right? And I try to say it. I even said it to someone recently where I was in a situation where I was working with someone and something came up on my phone and it was really important that I reply to it. And I just said to that person, I said, you know what, I'm trying to practice single tasking. So if you don't mind, could you give me 2 minutes just to reply to this text because it's really important and it's timely? And the other person was like, ooh, I like this idea of practicing single tasking, right? And it was really funny because they then embraced it as this is a new way to think about it, right? Embracing single tasking. So I'm finding that that's an interesting way, at least if it's with another person, you can ask permission to can you play this experiment along with me?
Yeah. Can we pause for a second in this? Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so single tasking, and another way that I'm doing it, because I know people say like single tasking sounds impossible, Therese. And like you said, in radio, oh my gosh, right? The deadlines are coming fast and furious. When I'm sitting at my computer, I will sometimes now set a timer. We're in the process of shopping for a new home, and so my husband will text me like, "Oh, have you seen this one on Zillow?" And I want to go immediately check the link, right? Which I don't know why immediate is important, but somehow it is. And so I'm doing a much better job now of when I set a timer of 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I'm going to single task on something. Mm-hmm. Any texts, emails that come in, I'm not being pulled away, and until that alarm goes off. And often when the alarm goes off, I'm deep enough into the task that I'm not tempted to I can easily put off the Zillow search for another half an hour or something like that, right? Because often, and here's the other part that I talk about in the book that I found. If anything, if the demonstration of multitasking didn't turn you off, this will. When people multitask a lot, it gets harder to single task later. So I know plenty of people who will say, okay, yeah, my morning was scattered. I had a million things going on, but in the afternoon, I'm going to work on my book. Or in the afternoon, I'm finally going to work on that proposal that I've been meaning to get to. I'll give myself 2 hours to go deep. What they find is if you've been multitasking all morning, you won't be able to go deep, right? You won't be able to, I know you've been working on your novel or you just finished your novel. You won't be able to go deep into that writing mode, right? And so that's to me, the big red flag of multitasking is you cripple yourself to make it harder to single task later.
It's so true, because if I am going to have any success in writing, it's got to be in the morning, because it gets so derailed by the afternoon that I just don't find any success there.
And now that adds a new layer of interpretation to that. It's not just that perhaps you're a morning person, but it could also be that if you've set yourself up to be scattered in the morning, the afternoon, it's not going to go your way. Right?
Yeah, exactly that. Okay, I want to talk, this is a little bit of a jump, but I want to talk about the medical implications of some of the neuroscience that you reveal in this book. You have a chapter called chapter 11, which is called "Stay Healthier and Feel Less Pain." And we, in the past on this show, because it is an international show, we have talked about how basically how a doctor's office looks can send your brain signals about what kind of an environment you're in. So if you're in the United States, a doctor's office is often pastel colored, there's hand sanitizer, the doctors or the nurses are wearing certain colors. We expect these certain signals that, I guess, display a certain competence to what our expectations are. And then when you go traveling and you're in another country, oftentimes medical clinics, hospitals, what doctors are wearing is different. And whether or not they're good or bad, they could be just as great, just as competent, or even more so than what you're getting at home. But because the signals are not there, your brain has that wariness of like, I'm not sure that these people know what they're doing, just because it looks different. So we've talked about that on the show before. You take this even a step further. So let's talk about it. What are some of the things from this chapter that you want to tell us?
So I did. I just saw the episode with Tiffany where she had a respiratory infection, right, in Italy. Is that the one you're talking about? Yeah. Okay, so what does the chapter talk about? So this was mind-boggling to me. So basically the takeaway soundbite from this chapter, and then if you don't mind, I'll tell the story about how this made a big change in my own personal life. So the takeaway from this chapter is if you are in the presence of a doctor that you feel is both warm and competent, you will have less pain and your body will heal faster than if you're in the presence of a doctor who's cold and appears unorganized or incompetent, right? So it's really interesting. They haven't looked at the issue of like, what if the waiting room seems like the furniture is old and tatty and right? But or the walls seem like, man, this building seems way too old. Is the technology going to be right? What are they going to hook me up to? So that's a dimension they haven't looked at, but they have looked at the healthcare provider and the cues that those healthcare providers give, and they found that doctors who are both warm and competent, or who have signals that, they make eye contact, they smile at you, that would be the warmth. They have nice art on their walls. Even that is a signal of warmth, as well as competency. They're organized. They remember what you came in for your appointment for, right? You don't have to remind them several times during the appointment. They know how to use the stethoscope. Everything falls right into place with what you would expect. When those things, when it meets your expectations for warmth and competence, less pain, better recovery. So what would be more interesting for you first? Should I tell the story or talk about the science? What do you prefer?
Well, tell us a story.
Sure.
Tell us a story.
So the story. Okay, I had 4 years a primary care physician. That's what we call them in the United States for that, and the expats probably remember that. But basically, your everyday doctor, the person who knows your medical history, right? So I had my primary care physician was warm, yes, but he was not striking me as incredibly competent. He was the kind who, if I went in and I had 3 things to talk about, by the end of the appointment, he'd only remember one of them. He would forget, oh, I also need to have some blood work ordered. He would forget that, right? Or he would come in, talk with me for a few minutes, and then leave for long periods with no explanation, right? Just like, and I was just like, what is going on? It seems so disorganized and your memory's not good. But I stayed with him because I could always get an appointment. It was like almost like a walk-in clinic. If I needed to come that same day, they might have an opening. I could certainly get in tomorrow. And that's rare in the United States anymore, right? To get in that quickly. And so I'm embarrassed to admit, I just kept going to see him. But in any case, I had an experience that for many people would be like, I will never go back to him again, but I kept going back. So here is the experience, Katy. I had it's now 2025. This was maybe in 2013. My periods began to become longer and longer to the point where I was having my period 20 days a month.
Oh my gosh. Oof.
Yes. So for the men out there who don't know how long a period should be, a woman's period should be about 7 days, give or take a few, right? But 20 is wrong. Something's wrong.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. The first month it happened, I thought I just wasn't tracking it correctly. Second month, I'm like, ooh, this is not good. By the third month, I was in a state of panic, right? For a number of reasons, I couldn't get in to see my gynecologist right away. I was going to have to wait 3 weeks. I was panicked that I felt like I was hemorrhaging. But I could get into my primary care physician immediately. So I made an appointment with him. I go in and I explain to him my concern, 20 days a month. Oh my gosh, what is happening to me? And Katy, you know what he said? How's your husband with that?
Oh.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That's so bad.
It's so bad. I just sat there for a moment thinking for sure he's joking. And then I realized that with the sincere expression on his face, he's really asking about my husband and how he's doing with my problem.
Right.
And I said, he's worried about me. And he said, he's such a good guy, because my husband was also a patient of his. And I said, yes, he is. Now, getting back to my problem.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. So that should have been, I'm done with this doctor. But I wasn't. I was just like, okay, I should not talk with him about gynecological issues. We'll take that off the table. No problem, right? And I kept seeing him. But that should have been my cue that, like, okay, there's something wrong here. If he's more worried about my husband's experience of my hemorrhaging than my experience and what it means for my health.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, so bad. But then when I researched this chapter, again, it was the neuroscience that drew me to it. It wasn't because I was concerned about my doctor. I immediately started searching for a primary care physician who was not just warm, but super competent. And also his warmth was drawn into question by his concerns, right? Yeah, why are you not worried about me? Why are you worried about my husband? In any case, what the research indicates is that one of the things that happens when we have a doctor who's warm and competent is that we activate brain mechanisms that allow our body to heal faster. And part of it seems to be through oxytocin, which we've already talked about. Dan Bowling, who's a researcher at Stanford, believes his lab is starting to find evidence indicating that one of the things that happens when we have a doctor or a healthcare provider that we see as warm and competent, we get an oxytocin release the same way we might when we're in the presence of someone we care deeply about. So even though we don't care deeply about our doctor, just the warmth and trust that we get from them generates oxytocin in our system, and that oxytocin then can lead to, again, dopamine. It can actually lead to the release of endogenous opioids in our body. I've had the experience too where I thought I had my appendix, that I had appendicitis, and I went to an ER. This was I was traveling at the time, and I went into the ER room. It was in the United States, but the doctor was so incredibly competent, my tummy began to feel better. I'm like, oh, this is silly. Maybe I'm fine. Maybe it's just, gastrointestinal distress. And she's like, let's do a scan. And thank goodness she didn't, because she did do that because I was about to burst my appendix. Mm-hmm. But what the research indicates here, just getting back to the science, is that if we have a doctor that we trust, or even the nurse, if the entire experience is surrounded by people that makes us feel that we're in good hands, the prescriptions that they prescribe will be more effective for us, and we will also heal faster. and we will have less pain. And they found that this placebo effect works for not just pain, but works for allergic responses. It works for IBS. It works even for people with autism in terms of their communication skills. If they're in the hands of a healthcare professional that they trust, their communication and social skills improve. So it's just remarkable the extent to which we can see these placebo effects through having a doctor that cares.
It's amazing. I mean, you talk about an experiment in there where the people are given a cream that doesn't do anything. Is that right?
That's
where
right.
but some people are told by a competent person, this might cause you a rash. Is that right? Do I have that right? Or they're told by a competent person, this cream is going to make everything better. You're going to feel so much better immediately. And they actually reacted in the way that the doctor indicated.
Yeah, so it's really fascinating. I don't know if anyone's had an allergy test where they poke your skin with histamine and you're going to get an allergic reaction. So that's what they did first. Everybody's skin got poked with histamine and they got an angry bump on their skin. And then they gave them this inert cream, basically this white lotion that they told them either, like you said, this is going to make the bump go down, or this bump is going to make the bump go worse. I don't know what explanation they gave for that latter part, but they said this is going to make it worse or better. When they told them it was going to make it worse, that's called the nocebo effect. And the nocebo effect, and sure enough, it did. It actually made the bump redder and angrier. But when they told them it was going to make it better, what mattered was how warm and how competent was that healthcare professional who was just putting that little swirl of cream on their arm, right? And basically, if they told them, if it was a highly competent person, as well as a warm person who made a lot of eye contact, who was applying that lotion, that bump went down. It didn't disappear, but it went down significantly. Basically, their skin is saying, oh, we're in good hands. It's all okay. Isn't this just remarkable? Whereas if the person, the people who were in the worst situation was people who were told it's going to help, but then they had an incompetent doctor who basically couldn't figure out the blood pressure cuff, who made no eye contact, just looked at the computer and typed in things. I've had a doctor like that. I don't know about you, where they don't look at you at all, right? If they had a doctor like that, even if they were told this is going to help, it made no difference, right? It was looking like that angry bump that had been told, it's going to make it worse. So it's just remarkable. It's one thing to think, oh, the pain systems might kick in if I believe the doctor's helping me. But to think that down to an allergic reaction, your mental interpretation of that doctor's behavior influences whether your body says, we're on high alert, everything's wrong, or oh, you know what? It's all okay. You know what? It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
It is amazing. I mean, on a minor example that you give too is that, if you said somewhere in there that even if we have an expectation that something's going to help us, like if you have a headache and you take an aspirin, because you've always in the past, aspirin has helped with your headache, whether or not the aspirin helps, your brain already is help's on the way, and the headache can start to go down even before the aspirin kicks in, which is interesting.
It's so fascinating. Yeah, they found that this was probably one of the first findings I had read about this was that brand name like ibuprofen and Tylenol, Advil and Tylenol, are more effective for people when they know their brand name than if they believe they're taking generic. And if they take generic versions of those two drugs, but they're told their brand name, they're more effective than if they're told they're generic. So if you ever have a guest at your home and they say, I've got a really bad headache, have you got anything for it? Even if you're giving them the generic version of ibuprofen, tell them it's Advil, and they will have less pain. So this is just crazy, right?
That's crazy.
It is.
We were just talking about what happened to Nuprin. Do you remember Nuprin when we were kids? Little yellow different. It was basically ibuprofen, but it was colored yellow for some reason.
Okay.
And they tried to sell us on the idea that yellow was somehow better. But apparently it didn't work because there's no more Nuprin being sold in the United States, as far as I know.
Right. And when you think about it, even the generic ibuprofen is that orange kind of brownish tablet, right? So they try to pose and make it look like it's the brand name Advil, even when it's generic. So very interesting. And in any case, so if you're living abroad right now, and I've had the experience where I walk into a pharmacy in a foreign country and I need to get a drug, and we need to look up what's the name of it, in the U.S. so that the pharmacist in Germany or wherever it might be can help me figure out what I need and at what dosage. Just tell yourself, it's even better in Germany. It's even better in Italy, right? Tell yourself that the drugs here are going to be as effective, if not better, because your belief in that drug being effective. Whereas if you are of the belief that like, oh no, the only place that I can get good painkillers is, blank. Sure enough, you're going to have a bad experience.
Wow, that's fascinating. So that indicates that we can like brain and wash ourselves to feel certain things.
We can, right? I think it helps. I think it helps if there's someone else, if there's a third party reassuring us of something, right? But the good news is that we can brainwash ourselves. We just need to lean into it. We need to believe that what we've heard is true. So this, to me, I have a really good friend who always looks for the worst angle of things, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. She'll try to find that one case of that one person who got cancer from putting her cell phone in her breast pocket or whatever, right? And if she can find one case, then she believes, well, it must be true across the board. That approach is going to make her life so much harder, right? Because if you're always looking for that one instance, you're basically giving yourself that nocebo effect, that effect of, I have a negative belief, and sure enough, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mm-hmm. So the main takeaway is if you don't trust your primary care doctor 100%, you should start shopping around again.
Exactly. That would be my takeaway. Start looking for a new doctor. You are going to have less pain and you're going to heal better. And any prescription that doctor prescribes you is going to be more effective. So go for it.
All right. Well, we are totally out of time, but is there one more thing that you'd like to leave us with? I'm going to just have to bypass the rest of my questions, I think. Let's just touch briefly, unless something really jumps to your mind, since we talk so much about art and creativity on this show. Is there a role of art or creativity in all of this brain science?
So the research on creativity and neuroscience, I'd say it's in its infancy stages. It's in its early beginning stages. But the thing that I find most interesting, there's a lot of psychological research on how to improve creativity. The one piece of advice that I'll give on how to stoke your creativity, and they're still figuring out the neuroscience to this, but what really can help is a walk, and it doesn't need to be an hour-long walk in a meadow or in the woods. It can be what Marilee Pezzo at Stanford has found is as short as 0.2 of a mile. So depending on how quickly you walk, that might be a 5-minute walk, maybe even a 4-minute walk, but 1/5 of a mile outside and preferably random. So walk out your door and turn the direction you don't normally turn, and then make another turn, and then maybe turn back around. But the idea of getting out and moving, what they find is when people sit back down, if you immediately start whatever that creative task is, you should have some new ideas. So it's good for divergent thinking, coming up with new ideas. And it's and when we think about it, people like Steve Jobs, there are a number of famous creatives out there who insisted on their daily walks. And where the science is starting to catch up and say, no, there is really something, especially, like I said, to a random walk. So a short random walk. I
love that. And another thing I took away is by having flowers in the house. I like having a flower in the house. I'm gesturing to one that's sitting there, but I don't always have them because I don't have a lot of flowers growing in my yard. And so, the idea of just having a simple flower sitting around can somehow make your mind feel a little differently.
Yeah, that's one that I've put into practice. I now keep an orchid on my desk. And whenever that one dies, because I'm not great at taking care of them, but it's easy enough to find orchids. Usually they're about $10, and $10 is a good investment in my creativity once every 3 weeks, right? So I keep a little potted orchid on my desk where I can see it. So the point being, it needs to be visible. Mm-hmm. So if you're putting a plant or flowers on your desk, it needs to be something that within your just sitting there range of vision. So you don't want it on the bookshelf behind you. You want it to be, and outside, you want it to be right in your narrow range of vision.
Yeah. We could go on and on. I mean, I enjoyed this book so much. Again, the title is Sharp, 14 Simple Ways to Improve Your Life with Brain Science. We'll put a link in the show notes so that you can easily find it without having to remember that at all, because, you need to work on your memory, and you're going to find all the tips that you need in this book. Therese, thank you so much for doing this.
You're just such a wonderful human being. It's really fun to be here, Katy. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for coming to my house. All right, well, we will leave it there. Feel free to submit your questions if you want Therese to come back, and I'll see if I can entice her. bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katy Sewell. Talk to you next week. Bye. If you love the show, help spread the word to others by giving us a quick 5-star review wherever you listen. We love reading your comments and compliments. They are like fuel to the work. Thanks for taking the time.